The Family Man.
Okay.
Did you ever watch that movie?
No, I mainly just know it for the cake sequence.
Oh, fuck, I hate the cake sequence.
That's all I know about it. Yeah.
Like,
but do you know it as the meme, or do you only know it as the scene in the movie? Because it's become like the most kind of like referenced element of the movie as far as I'm concerned.
Really?
Yeah. Like I think it got like somebody like reanimated the sequence, so you can see like an animated Nicolas Cage just being like, "Hey, where's my cake? I want my cake." And like they remixed it into a song, and that's what I know. That's my main reference to the Family Man.
Okay.
I do remember the trailer when it came out.
I haven't seen the GIF thing or whatever, the meme. I haven't seen that.
Do you remember when the trailer came out? Because that kind of made the movie sort of appealing to me. I
seem to recall the trailer being on a video cassette that I had. Maybe it was like, frick, I don't know.
I remember
the beginning of Men in Black or Mask of Zorro or something like that.
Well, they were using that famous Talking Heads song that actually was like very appropriate, based, I guess, on like the premise of the movie.
I'm a family man. That one?
No. It's just sort of like, how does it go? It's the one where
this is not my
beautiful wife. This is not my beautiful wife. This is not my beautiful home.
House. Yeah.
How did I get here? And the days go by. So I was just sort of like, I'm like, did somebody base a movie off the Talking Heads song? Is that what this whole thing's about? But yeah, no, is the movie pretty like Christmassy as a whole? Or
yeah, I would say so. It's pretty legit. I mean,
was it like a Christmas miracle that creates the whole timeline break?
I'm trying to remember.
I guess?
I actually haven't seen it many times. I think I only watched it in its entirety for the first time last year, maybe.
Yeah.
Last year around Christmas time. But yeah, I mean, it's got a pretty strong holiday sort of theme. It might be sort of some Christmas magic. I'm not familiar enough.
Well, the premise is it's a guy who gets to like relive his life as if he chose to be a family man instead of the businessman he is.
Which is a fun concept. It's actually a little bit like It's a Wonderful Life in that way.
Yeah.
Hey, why don't we segue into It's a Wonderful Life for a moment? Because
sure. Yeah, that's like that's one of the big classic ones. Like that's. Do you watch It's a Wonderful Life every year, or did you used to with your family?
I only actually watched that one for the first time a couple years ago as well. Damn. So I've been sort of catching up on some of these, but I thought it was a really good movie, and I wasn't expecting it to have that sort of fantasy element to it. But imaginative element, I guess you would say. Yeah. But I always like it when movies do that. I think that's what often makes a story more interesting is, does it bring some imagination to the table, or is it just going to be a movie that is like regular people living in the real world, kind of doing normal things, you know? Well,
what's neat is the fantasy element of that movie is like, it's such a small percentage of the movie, and yet it's a very important element of the movie. But as you start watching the movie more and more, and you're just getting more and more into George Bailey's life story, when it gets back into the fantasy element, you actually forget that there even ever was a fantasy element to begin with, and you're like, oh, right, there's a fucking angel in this movie. Yeah.
Now, what is it that he does? He shows him what the world would be like if he had died, basically, right?
Well, there's a part where basically what happens is after, so George Bailey's about to commit suicide, and then the angel jumps over the bridge instead, so that he saves the angel instead of committing suicide. And then afterwards they're drying off, and he says like, sometimes I just wish I was never born. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, oh, really? Well, why don't we show you what would, because I think he even says, he's like, oh, everyone would just be better off if I was never born. It's like, would you? Yeah. Well, let's just see what that would actually be like, you know? And then everything's way more shit. And so, it's that's kind of that Scrooge element where he realizes
shows him an alternate reality kind of thing.
Of how important he is to everybody, and how he's like very useful and important. Yeah. And then even after all of that, like all of the friends and family come out to help this guy who's been nothing but selfless his whole life to help everybody else, and they come and help him, and it's it's just a real emotional, tear-jerking kind of like ending, and it's not it's sentimental. That's a movie but not
that has like this real depressing aspect of it for a lot of the movie, but then it turns out to be this very heartwarming finish that it arrives at.
Yeah.
You know, like it comes around to.
I actually think most of the movie is actually fairly heartwarming, but then it becomes depressing.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's
but then it comes back at the end with the, and even like the end, like the happy ending isn't even like, oh shit, we hit the big times. It's just sort of like, no, my friends were able to help out, so we weren't completely fucked, you know. And but it
is very heartwarming though compared to what, and this is probably like actually a principle of filmmaking, is that you experience the story sort of relative to what else has gone on, right? So if you go to a dark place dramatically, then when you go to a brighter place later, like sort of the relative experience that you have makes it that much more dramatic, that much more substantial. It's like you show this real low that a character gets to, but that makes it more impactful when you go to the high place. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right.
Experiencing it in relation to each other.
Did you ever see any other Frank Capra movies? This was my intro to Frank Capra.
That's right. It was a Frank Capra movie.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say
what else has he done that would have been
Arsenic and Old Lace. Oh, there's another famous one from the 30s. It's like the first screwball comedy, and it won all the Oscars. Okay, I'm not going to remember the title of that. He did Meet John Doe. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Oh. He could have had a whole series going on there.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington was supposed to be a sequel to Mr. Deeds Goes to Town.
Okay, then makes sense. I haven't seen them, but I've heard of those ones.
I'll be honest, I don't think I've seen a bad Frank Capra film.
Nice.
They're surprisingly entertaining for how old they are. But It's a Wonderful Life is probably my favorite. It's the real classic one. It's the one that he'll probably be most remembered for.
Well, you used to say that this was at a time your favorite movie, period. Hey?
It was never my favorite movie, but there was a period where it was in my top 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it still is. I don't really believe that much in overall top 10s anymore, but yeah, it's like, I'm a really big Jimmy Stewart fan, and it's kind of a perfect movie. Like, I'm trying to think if there's any. That's usually the way I kind of go about when I'm trying to think about like really good movies. Sometimes it's easier to just think like, well, does it have any flaws? And there's not really any flaws I can find in It's a Wonderful Life. Like, the pacing is really well done. The performances are all stellar. The directing is great. Like, it's weirdly enough, I don't think it was the smash hit that you might think it was when it first came out. Like, I think it was a moderate success, but even for Frank Capra, I don't think it did as well as some of those other ones.
It's almost like gained more appreciation over time.
Yeah. Kind of like Wizard of Oz, right?
Right. Which I fucking hate Wizard of Oz.
Oh, do you really?
I'm not gonna lie. I do not like that movie.
I like it, but well, that's a whole other conversation.
No, let's debate Wizard of Oz right now.
We should do a Wizard of Oz episode for sure.
Yeah,
though.
We should actually. Maybe you'll help me find some appreciation for it. I mean, look,
to me, it's just a bit long. It's when they decide. To me, the movie feels like it should have ended when they're approaching the wizard, and then the movie goes on for like another 20 or half an hour. But to me, I'm like, oh god, there's there's more.
Well, we won't get too hung up on that, but we'll do an episode on it.
There's that poppy scene where it looks like there's snow coming down. That's kind of Christmassy.
Is that the one from Wizard of Oz?
Yeah, where they're in the poppy fields and it's snowing.
Oh, okay. You're just you're just really grasping at straws to bring this.
It wasn't snow;
relevance.
It was asbestos.
Oh,
it actually was asbestos. Yeah, that probably was what killed them all. But yeah. Well, anyways, I don't have too much more to say. Like with It's a Wonderful Life, like it's really only like the last little chunk that's Christmassy, and most of the movie is not. So there's not a ton of things that I'll say about it as far as that's the only reason why it might not have been number one on my list, just because there's so much in the movie that isn't a Christmas movie.
It doesn't quite qualify in a really strong way. But again, it's got some great shots and cinematography and stuff. And there's a black and white version and there's a color version, I believe, too. I'm pretty sure I watched I think I watched the colored version.
The more I saw, there's an old colored version, which is like the old Ted Turner colorization is garbage, but there's a more recent colorization that I'm like, fuck, where was, like, I wish I could have watched the movie like this for the first time.
I think I saw the newer one, because the one I saw looks pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
And it was beautifully colored. Was that the one? It starts where they're like sledding and they break through the ice and the kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the very first scene, but that's really early in the movie. Yeah,
right, okay,
and that's where George Bailey goes deaf in one ear because of that,
right,
which has a small sort of play into it and stuff. But I remember it was on a VHS tape when I was a kid that had a bunch of other movies on it that I was much more into because they were more modern. And then whenever the movie would end, the beginning of It's a Wonderful Life would start. And it would be the part where there's just like the angels in the space. They're just talking to each other and there's beams of light. Right. And I would watch it for a few minutes and just be like, God, this is boring. Yeah. And I would just always turn it off, like not realizing that it would later become like one of my favorites.
Yeah, so funny.
But,
wow. But that's interesting. I actually love, I think it's got some really beautiful opening shots of like the city streets and it's all snowy and it like pans over to the house and man, stuff like that just is great. And stuff like that, it's simple too. It's just sequences and shots like that kind of draw you into a story as well. It kind of reveals this environment to you.
Yeah.
And, you're starting off on this adventure. But I really like movies that have kind of a slow, calm, soothing sort of start that sort of massage you into the story, Well,
I love
as opposed to just like smacking you in the face.
Yeah, I love that they really put a large little chunk at the beginning to when he's a kid. Before they really
and that was great stuff too.
Yeah. And it's like he's a character where he's so perfect that's almost the flaw of like, you're like, does somebody like George Bailey actually exist in real life? Could anyone actually be like that good and wholesome? But there's some great range. Like, I think it's actually one of Jimmy Stewart's best performances because as well as most of the movie, like he goes through quite an age range too. Like I think he's supposed to be maybe in his late teens or early 20s when he first shows up as Jimmy Stewart.
Right. Okay.
And then he kind of ages into his 30s and so. But there's like a large amount of growth and like.
Yeah. Wow. I was forgetting that it takes place over such a time span.
Yeah. Like the girl, like his like love interest. Like I think she's still like in high school when he first comes back and everything.
Yeah.
But
I've like because I've only seen it the one time too. Hey, so. Again, it's not, I was sort of forgetting some of these things, but as you're talking about it, it's like, oh yeah, I'm being reminded of all that stuff that happens.
Well, most of the movie is just him having his dreams just shattered one by one and him just sort of being like, well, I got to do the right thing. Yeah. And then by the time it gets to the end of the movie and everything's kind of just turned to shit, he's just sort of like, all I tried to do was the right thing over and over again. All it did was fuck me over. And he's like bona fidely like a dick, like towards the end of the, like before the whole angel stuff. It's like, and it's not that he's.
Well, that's where a lot of the movie, it's like a downfall story.
Well, he's having a nervous breakdown, right? He's like, I literally, it's because he loves his family. He's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do, which is why he's like shouting at his kids and just kind of being a dick and just because he's just sort of like everything in my life has gone wrong. And all I did was try to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And,
well, that's where it's probably such an impactful movie too, because I think often doing the right thing and not getting rewarded for it does feel that way.
Well, yeah, and the unique thing is like if you do the right thing, people do take notice, which is why he was saved at the end. All these people were like, we're not going to let George Bailey go down. Like everybody like talks about all the things that he did. And so in the end of the movie, it is this sort of karma of all of those good things he did come back to him in the end. And it was based on his character and the type of person he was, not just that they were like, oh, we're going to, I don't think they would have done that for anybody in that town. They did it because it was the George Bailey character. Right. And so it's kind of like saying like, if you do, I mean, I don't think the message is trying to say like do good things so that good things happen to you, but it's trying to say like there are things that are more important than money, like good friends and family. And if you have those good relationships, like things like money could actually come towards you in good fortune because of those more important things, which are the relationships.
Yeah.